Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And today we have another author interview here on the channel. He's a first timer here, and he's very excited to share with you all his story and his book, I Am King of the King series. Now, my guest was born in Dominica and was raised in the village of Giraudel by his grandparents before moving to the United States at the age of 11. He's always wanted to be a writer, but went into real estate management and has done every job in real estate you can think of, from doorman, porter, leasing manager to renting apartments in Manhattan and selling million-dollar homes in Brooklyn. He loves everything fantasy from Tolkien to Martin and every RPG game under the sun. As he rekindled his love for writing, his particular interest in swords and sorcery became the basis for his debut series, I Am King. He lives in New York City with his wife, his son Beau, and his daughter Rose. And to tell us all about I Am King of his King series, let's give a huge round of applause to author Damien Shilingford. Damien, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Gabriel. Appreciate you having me here. It means a lot to give me a chance to talk about my book, I Am King, my series. The second book just came out last month. I Am King is a fantasy adventure, sword and sorcery story. It's about a young prince. It's a hidden prince, trope. And
All
it's about a
right.
young prince named Beau who is hiding away in this new country that's newly discovered in this world of Daconis. And the usurper in his home island of the Middle Islands killed his
Ooh.
family. Yeah, took the crown. So he's in hiding, waiting until he's of age to be a man to then challenge the usurper and take back the crown. Of course, plans don't go as they hoped, and the usurper discovers where he's hidden, and he sends assassins to find Beau. And this is when the story really kicks in and starts, revving up with the action and the intensity, and it kind of becomes sort of a survival type of story because
Okay.
our protagonist is being challenged by the elements. It's cold, they're out in the wilderness, he's being challenged by the assassins chasing him, and then there are mythical monsters and creatures that they encounter along the way. And that's pretty much the gist of this my first debut, I Am King book one.
Awesome. So let's actually talk about yourself as a writer. Now, in your bio, you said that you were always fascinated with writing, but you went into real estate management and you've done every job that falls under that category. But then you rekindled your passion later and was able to create this amazing new series. So walk us through that. What was that aha moment in your life that you wanted to tell this story that's been with you from the get-go?
Yeah, so the I Am King story. So book one was based on a story that I developed around when I was about 14, 15 years old. I'm 41 now, so that was a long time
Okay.
ago. Um, and it grew out of my love from RPG. So I played a lot of Diablo 2 at the time, and I was
Oh, okay.
game and World of Warcraft. And I love, reading and Lord of the Rings. So I wanted to create something for myself. So I attempted to write this story at the time, but I think a lot of authors could relate to this part of it. It's easy to start and get a story going, but if you don't have that experience, you fall off. And I tried
Mm-hmm.
many times to write this book. It never happened. And the thing that really made it happen for me finally when I was a little older was the birth of my first son, Beau. So my son's name is Beau, and the main character in the book is Beaumont. So it's really a
Ooh.
story that I named after him. And the idea was, I wanted to make sure that when I raised my son, I, inspired him in a way so that he understands if he has a dream that he follows through and, anything is possible. And I thought to myself, well, I can't really teach that lesson if I don't even follow that myself. And I thought
Right.
this was a good opportunity to then go back in and really try it. And now that I had more of a motivating factor other than I love video games and I want to kind of like imagine this world in my head, I had a real tangible reason, which is this young child that I'm raising, and I wanted to create something for him, a legacy that I could leave behind for him and my grandchildren, future generations. It really gave me the push to focus in. And I took the additional steps to really do research and read up on other authors to really find out what this craft of writing is about and what it takes to actually complete a manuscript and really publish a book. And it was really the birth of my son that really gave me that final push to really go for it and finish the book.
Nice. You're probably the third guest I've had on the show who said that, their children were their inspirations. And you're definitely like the third guest who's like had that be like the motivating factor. My first guest who like started this, her name is M Fire. She has a daughter and she was into, if I'm not mistaken, music. And the daughter wanted to pursue music. And remember from the interview, we were talking, and then M Fire said, my daughter kind of called me out on, what I was saying. It's like, I'll do this, mom, if you actually do your writing, because M was really interested in like writing growing up and telling stories. And
Yeah.
so her daughter kind of called her out and really pushed her to make her own series. So, that's very, very interesting, like all these different things that either it's family that's the big motivator, it's children who are the motivator, it's whatever thing in an author's life motivates them and pushes them to create this story. And I always love that. I always love learning about what was that drive, that push. And speaking of that going forward, now, as you said, Damien, just a while ago, that you had a second book that came out for this series not too long ago. So let's actually look at the whole process. So when you began writing and paying the story out from the first book and of course the second book, what was the sole desire you wanted to satisfy for your readers and the goal? What was the goal you had in mind that pushed you to tell this story?
Yeah, so part of it was, doing the research to kind of understand my genre. I love fantasy, but there's more to it when you decide to actually work and create art when you're just a consumer and a reader of entertainment. So in the process of learning that, I picked up a couple of really important points being, series are everything.
Yes.
Fantasy readers are voracious readers. They're actually very unforgiving. You can't start a series and not finish it. You're gonna get the pitfalls. So
Yes.
I learned that very early on, and I made sure I set a goal that okay, I want to tell the story, and I want to also make sure that I don't fall into any of the pitfalls that maybe other authors have who've attempted.
All
So
right.
a lot of research on Amazon, reading reviews, and I would go to the one-star reviews of all my favorite books to kind of get a sense of, well, what are some of the pain points that readers have? And doing that research, I found out a couple of things which kind of formulated my idea. So once I had a whole plan in place, I sat down, I did a little summary, and I was able to map out my series. So as of today, I can let you know that it is going to be a 5-book series. The characters in the first book, the main characters, Beau and his sidekick, his cousin Julius, who is his actual cousin Julius. He has a cousin named Julius that they're very close. So I put him in the book too.
Nice.
As readers follow my series, they're going to grow with these characters. So though they start at 10 years old in this particular time in their life, and they're still 10 in book 2. Once we get to book 3, they're going to be in their teens, about 15, and then their lives and the things that they deal with are going to change. It's going to be a little bit of conflict with romance and learning that aspect of growing up. And then in book 4 and 5, as these characters continue to grow, they're going to be young men in their early 20s. So it's really going to follow this great growth along the way. And that's how I mapped out the series. And this is, again, based on research because, when fans connect with a character, they want to get back in that world. When they're not
Right.
in the book, they're thinking about that character and they can't wait for the next series because they want to know what happens and they're invested. And I felt that connecting them early on so they could really see this person grow up, kind of like someone they know in real life, would connect them on a more deeper level to the narrative. And that was kind of like the overall goal for mapping out the series when I did. So it's a character driven story. I don't think I write too many crazy plot twists. I've had some reviews that said that, people were surprised by some things, and I
Right.
try to put that in there. But the kind of stories I enjoy are character driven. So a lot of my focus is on building those characters up and making sure that my readers, once they read the book, they become invested and that they want to continue on this journey with Beau and Julius and all the other main characters in the story.
Awesome. So when you began, of course, after the edits, finding the cover artists and
Mhm.
then formatting, how big the book you want to be, how many pages, size, all of that, and then publishing it on Amazon for the first book, and then now with the second book out, what were the reviews like, the initial reviews for book one, and
Mhm.
like, of course, the initial beta reads for like book two? Were they positive, mixed, favoring one side or the other? And is there one review that stands out to you that is really like a testament to you as an author?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, with that first book, and I'm sure yourself and many other authors have experienced it, there's this uncertainty because, as you know, writing is a very lonely process.
Yes.
It could be a team effort. If you were to partner with another author, but for the most part, it's a very lonely process. There's very little feedback. To get feedback, that's asking a big investment. So once I finished the book and I published it, all I knew and all I had to go by was the fact that, you know what, when I read the book, I liked it. And that's all I had. And my only hope was, well, if I like it and there are things in there that appeal to me, hopefully there will be other readers who would connect with it as well. So there was a lot of anxiety there. So once I put it out and I got the first reviews coming in, I got I guess the one that really, I guess, gave me that validation was
Right.
it was from the Queen's Gambit website where they review fantasy books. I submitted my first book into the SF, the Science Fiction and Fantasy Blog Off. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
Ooh.
that contest.
I don't think so. I've heard of it from other authors, but I haven't gone
FBA.
more into detail myself looking into it.
Yeah, so I did submit it for their seventh annual contest, and I didn't make it out the first round. But what was really validating was the review I got was extremely strong, and this person really connected with the story. This particular reviewer, she really understood what I was trying to create. She caught on to a lot of the subtle things that I put into the story and the narrative, and it kind of gave me that validation that, you know what, as afraid of as I was when I released it, it looks like I think I might have did a good job. So it was good
Right.
to get that feedback that the book was people liked it. And then as the organic reviews started coming in, I average about a 4.4 star rating on Amazon and through Goodreads. So all the reviews have really been positive. The beta feedback I received for book one and for book two was really great. Of course, going into book two, I had a lot more confidence with the success I had in book one. So, when I had the pen in my hand, I was very confident with what I was putting down. And then to also get that additional feedback, it was really good. Also, the criticisms, there were certain criticisms, and these were things
Hmm.
I also picked up on as well. That was very helpful because it also showed me the things I had to be more mindful of and pay attention to. So, I mean, the reviews have been invaluable in the entire process, to be honest. Yeah.
That's actually really great. And you actually touched on something that I was actually going to mention earlier, which is, of
Mhm.
course, writing is a very lonely experience because it
Yeah.
takes, years, if not decades, to get just the first draft off the pages. And then after that, it's another several years fine tuning it and editing it. And then when you finally have it there with the cover artist, after it's been
Mhm.
edited, it's shaped and sized how exactly you want it, and then publishing it on the digital stage, there is that anxiety because you don't know if it is going to hit with your audience or resonate with the readers you
Yeah.
had in mind. Because
Yeah.
I'm sure you definitely agree, Damien, we are
Mhm.
the first target audience. If we're not happy with our own story, then our readers are not going to be happy with the story as well. And
100%.
then that voice of imposter syndrome comes with a vengeance, and definitely plays a huge factor into how we view our own work, because we tie it
Yeah.
to our own self-worth as authors, which is very, very detrimental. So for you, Damien, from
Mhm.
book one and now book two, have you ever had those moments of imposter syndrome? And if not, what has continued to discipline you to continue writing and telling the story and sharing it with others?
Mhm.
Because, in your opinion, this is a story that needs to be told and shared with other fans of the fantasy genre.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, I think first off, before again, the research before I put the book out is so important. I did a lot of research trying to find, fantasy books that kind of touched on some other mythology and kind of structure other than the what we've come to accept as the European based mythology, with the knights and dragons. But in
Right.
various cultures, we all in all our cultures, Hispanic, African, Asian, we all have mythology that we could pull from and create in a fantasy sense. And my original upbringing, I'm from the West Indies, from the island. So I'm from the island of Dominica in the West Indies. It's a very little island in the very center of the chain down to South America. And, I was looking for authors in the fantasy genre, maybe that would have used maybe, Haitian or Creole type of mythology in their writing. And I couldn't find anything. So to me, that was a missed opportunity. And I thought to
Mhm.
myself, well, if I can't find that book, instead of sitting around waiting for it, I have the experience. Why not just be the one to create it? And that's what I did. As much as I love my traditional fantasy, my Game of Thrones, which I don't know if you watched last night's episode of House of Dragons, but whoo,
I haven't yet. I haven't.
okay, no spoilers. We're not even going to go into that, but I love that stuff. But I thought to myself there was always a great opportunity to kind of mix and mash and introduce some new perspectives. Like we have Evan Winters, who is the author of the Rage of Dragons series, which is really great. A very strong fantasy story. Revenge is the theme, and he puts in his own ancestral African heritage into the story, which
Right.
a really unique flavor and kick to it. So I thought to myself, why not do something that has that Creole West Indian flavor? Like let's talk about, witch doctors, and let's talk about voodoo, and how these things could play into a fantasy setting. And and that was a part of what I gave me that confidence to say, you know what, there might be a place for this book, because I know I'm not the only West Indian who loves video games and fantasy. There has to be others
Right.
out. You know what I mean? So even for them, and then I think just for traditional fantasy readers, it's kind of like a break from the norm to jump into a fantasy that has the elements that you're used to, that you still love. That hero's journey, the hidden
Hmm.
themes, the big epic fights, the battles, the magic, but to also give it a little flavor of something different. We have characters who are people of color leading the fray. And you're taking, and then I'm taking my readers into some unique settings that they might not have been in before. So I mean, all of those little intricate things gave me the confidence to really jump into it and try to create something that was new and hopefully refreshing, and that people would be open to.
You from what you just described to me, you have the same, drive as two other guests who I had on the show, Jamar Jackson,
Yeah.
and more recently, Tatiana Obe. Tatiana,
Hey.
he
Well,
tell me the whole story about Sister Samurai and the whole drive behind that, how it was an homage to Afro Samurai for fans who love that anime. And
mhm.
also for people who want to hear more about that interview, definitely go check it out. And Jamar Jackson,
Mhm.
who wrote his series as a love letter to the Power Rangers, and he wanted to take his own inspiration, what he loved about the Power Rangers, but give it his own spin. Definitely go check out that interview as well. So from what
Yeah.
I'm getting is that you're absolutely right. The fantasy genre is vast, but we very rarely seem to explore the European medieval fantasy. And again, nothing that is wrong with that
No,
genre of yours,
love
literature,
it.
or that setting.
I can't get
But
enough of it. Yeah.
yeah, but I definitely you agree, Damien, that there are other aspects of, real world cultures that you can make your own
Mhm.
fantasy world in. And I don't have it with me, but I see it right from the corner of my eye. It's The Final Strife by author um, Sara El Arfi. I probably butchered her name, but her story is a mix of Arabic, African. If I'm not mistaken, I think Sudanese and probably some parts of North Africa to
Ah,
create this amazing world. And you are right. Fantasy has other aspects to explore, which is ripe for the taking.
mhm.
And I think from there, this leads perfectly into the next question, which is now the business side of being an author.
Right.
Now, Damien, once you finish penning the first book, you had it
Yes.
already designed, you got the final thing. It's like, okay, yes, this is the book I want to share. Did you want to try your hand at traditional publishing through obviously researching which houses would be the most appropriate for your book, or because you knew the genre that this book was in, as well as the audience who would be very, very interested in this fantasy story, independent publishing would have been the better route or was the better choice. So, can you walk us through that process?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I thought about that a lot. I really did. And I'll just be honest, I did not think the traditional publishing path would work for myself or the book I was trying to present.
All right.
A couple of reasons for that. I just felt that just getting your foot in the door, first of all, it's tough. I mean, these publishing houses, as I understand it, they have these slush piles like this high, and they're just like zooming through manuscripts. They'll probably read 1, 2 pages. If it doesn't capture their attention, you're in the trash. And the
Right.
thought of submitting my manuscript to all these places, and the book not really getting that chance for someone to, give it a fair shot. I just didn't
Right.
feel I wanted to get into that grind. I wanted to do something that would give me a higher chance of success. And I felt that if I did not wait around, but then I stepped forward and I just produced it myself and I published it myself without any gatekeepers, I could get it out there to the world, to the people who are actually going to really enjoy the book and get it in front of them right away. So that decision to go self-publish, that's kind of like what I weighed, and that's what made the most sense to me. So once I did that, I came up with a plan. I laid everything out. I went ahead and I used Upwork, I used Fiverr. I was on
Mm.
Reddit for a long time looking for recommendations for editors, proofreaders, cover artists. I found a really great cover artist. We worked out a good deal, signed a contract, and I was able to get the first 3 covers done for my series.
Ooh, nice.
So year one, I had all 3 covers for the first 3 books already completed and lined up. And part of that was to also give me a kind of like milestones to keep me motivated, to keep me going, to know that this is already in place. Don't slow down, don't stop, no excuses, just keep writing. And it gave me a benchmark for me to reach each time. Once that was done, connecting with a good editor was important. The editor of my first book, they did a good job. But on a personal note, I don't think it was 100% a good connection. They helped me get through a lot of the missteps I had in the manuscript, which of course, I was able to correct and present a very good book, story-wise as well. But this particular individual, I don't think they really connected with the material, which is something again I
Mm.
was afraid of if I submitted it to a traditional publishing house, because it's not your typical fantasy, it's not your typical story. There are elements in there
Right.
that are going to be alien to the genre, and you kind of have to be open to trying something new. With my second book, I learned that lesson, so I was able to connect a little bit closer with my new editor. And this was a person who really got what I was trying to do. They understood the niche I was trying to capture. They understood where I was coming from as far as incorporating the mythology and especially the way I did it. So having a good connection with your editor is so important because besides yourself, this is the other person that's going to be the most close to your book. And if you're
Right.
going to go based on not just them correcting it, grammatically, but also helping, your editor, hopefully, depending on what your agreement is going to also help you uplift the narrative as well. So it was important to connect with a good editor that kind of understood my mission, my vision, and just to help me, make sure that the book was as strong as it possibly could be. As far as with the other stuff, I got to be honest. I learned early on that you got to stick to your lane. I love telling stories, making up stories and doing that stuff. Don't ask me to promote myself. There's a lot of people who I know on a personal level who have no idea that I'm even an author. And it's not good, but I have to be honest, as the way my personality and the kind of person I am, it's just difficult for me to put myself out there. So with
Right.
that being said, I kind of had to put out a little bit more money to work with professional marketers who would help me better promote my book through social media. And I'm working with some folks right now who are doing a really great job of revamping my whole system. I'm getting a new website. And I know you said you love the book covers, but they're actually in the process of being redone. So I'm going to revamp
Okay.
to try to keep it nice and uniform throughout for all 5 books. So, on the business side of things, there are a lot of things going on in the background right now to try to make sure my book is positioned in the best possible light that it could be positioned in.
Definitely, 100%. And you touched on a lot of stuff that is true for independent authors, that it is out of pocket. It is managing
Yeah.
money, cover artists,
Yeah.
editors, marketing.
Yeah.
Marketing is literally the thing that will break the camel's back for us independent authors because it's
Yeah.
not easy. We literally have to be either on social media,
Yep.
promoting our work in every capacity. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we'll have to get social media on other platforms if we're not like totally social media savvy. I've known many authors who are very, I don't want to say shy, but they're not really
Like a
the
little
best when it comes to
introverted,
like
right? Yeah.
marketing, but they realized if they wanted to get their book across, they had to go on other platforms. And also, I can't even forget, like, making our own websites. That's a huge thing as well to
Yeah.
manage it, to make sure the links are up to date, and to make sure the URL is up to date with the website. All of that takes a lot of time and planning. That's why so many books take about, 5, 6 years for everything to be done. Not just the
Yeah.
book itself, but it's everything behind the scenes,
Exactly.
which are greatly important. And
Okay.
speaking of behind the scenes, let's actually talk about more on the audience. So, as you said, Damien, you were writing this for the uh, fantasy genre for readers of the fantasy. But I think it's also important to note what kind of readers authors are writing towards, because as I said in the beginning, we're the first target audience. And then when we go to publish it for the new readers, people who are interested in our stories, we really have to think, okay, who exactly am I trying to market this towards? Am I marketing this towards people who like Lord of the Rings,
Mm-hmm.
Game of Thrones, House of Dragons? Because I'm sure you definitely agree, Jamie. You have seen books with those labels for
Yes.
fans of Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
fans of
I've used
Stephen
that in
King.
my thing as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So for you, do you have a good idea of your audience from book one now to book two? And in
Mhm.
your opinion, how important is it for an author to really understand their audience and who exactly they're writing for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so important. It's almost number one because if not, I mean, you're kind of like writing to the void, and who's going to read this story?
Right.
Um, you know, something I learned along the way when I was working through book one, and trying to find my path to try to finish this book and actually put out a successful book was that exact question. Like, who is this book for? And something I learned from, and I mentioned him earlier, Evan Winters. I was reading an interview of his and this revelation was very profound for me, and it changed a lot of things. But the fact was like, when you write the book, it's hard to write it for someone else. It's more important to write it for yourself. Because the idea is if you enjoy the book, there's a good chance there's going to be someone else who enjoys the book. So in my mind, my ideal reader is going to be someone like myself who loves traditional fantasy. There's nothing better in the world. Loves to consume all of it from Willow all the way down to, House of Dragons, anything
Right.
dragons and swords and fighting and wars. I would even throw books, I would even throw movies and films in there like Braveheart, because
Mm,
they just kind of fit into that whole theme. Like I love that ancient world, and gamers, because a lot of the tropes in my fantasy, it's not traditional D&D, but with the idea of people who are into things, because I'm a long time gamer myself. I have my little World of Warcraft tattoos on my forearm over here, if you can see that,
nice.
my Horde and Alliance tattoo. So I'm a lifetime gamer, and tapping into those, those archetypes like the paladin and the druids, like, and the barbarians from Diablo, and these characters and the undead. Like I think folks who spend a lot of hours in those environments, in those virtual worlds, are going to get a kick out of these books, because I take that aspect of it, and as someone who's a fan, I kind of like throw it into these stories, and you get a chance to really live through it, through these characters, to make it come to life in this, in this world. So definitely my ideal reader is going to be someone who is, basically like myself, like you love fantasy, but you're open to seeing some of these new and different and cool things, like the witch doctors and the voodoo, the
Right.
witch doctors in Diablo 2, which were, one of the most interesting, characters. And well, I should say Diablo 3. They're gonna be gamers out there calling me out on that. No, Diablo 2. I got it, guys. I got it. Yeah, but anyways, so gamers and lovers of fantasy, that's my jam. Those are my fans. Those are the ones who are going to jump into this book. Once they start reading these stories, they're going to connect with them right away, because it's definitely going to remind them of those worlds and, those places that they've enjoyed their time in. Yeah.
You and another one of my previous guests, Jasmine Young, would definitely get along very well. She is a gamer as well. And in fact, her story,
Mm-hmm.
which is another dragon story, was heavily inspired by the RPG games that she grew up loving. In fact, in her book, she actually has a leveling system that the dragon goes through and the writer goes through, which is unique because I've never read a story where there's a leveling or progression system
Yeah.
in the story. So that is, very, very fascinating. Which
Mm-hmm.
actually leads now into the next question, which is now the uh, inspirations and those who push us to be the best versions of ourselves. Now, as you mentioned in your bio, video games, movies, and the great titans of the genre, George R. Martin, Tolkien, and more, were
Mm-hmm.
instrumental in your creation of this series, as well as sort of fine tuning your voice as an author. Are there any other authors you would like to give a shout out to? Any works of fiction or any other games or movies you would say were very important? But I also add on this side question to it because I'm really eager to hear your thoughts. Now, I know you definitely agree that a lot of books have the tagline, oh, the next George R. R. Martin, the next Tolkien.
Yeah.
And one of my guests actually had a comment on that where, for first time authors, when they see it, it's like, oh, that's what we all aspire to be the next so and so. He had a different approach. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to be the next George R. R. Martin. He didn't want to be the next J.K. Rowling. He didn't want to be the next Tolkien because that puts a preconceived idea for the reader of what to expect in
Right.
your book.
Yeah.
And your book can be completely different from
Right.
what they're used to. They want, in his words, to read a book by the author to know, okay, this is so and so's book. It's not George R. R. Martin. It's
Mm-hmm.
not J.K. Rowling. Yes, he mentioned in his bio that he was inspired by these, but it's not trying to be or trying to emulate
Emulate. Yeah.
that feeling. So let's actually talk about that too. So, who are the other people who helped you become the author you are now? And
Mm-hmm.
what were your thoughts on this discussion where we don't want to be the next so and so, we want to be our own authors?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That second one, that's a really good point. I'm definitely interested in diving into that. As far as influences, so I would say yes. I love the kings of the genre. I'll go ahead and throw Brandon in there. These guys they paved the way and really kind of shaped fantasy to what we have here today. You know, Brandon Sanderson being, I think, the one that's in the forefront, that's really pushing the boundaries and kind of bringing fantasy into a more modern readership and and world. But when it comes to the actual writing process, how I
Mm.
deliver my prose, I would have to say Stephen Pressfield is the author
Yes.
that, that inspired me. I mean, I said his name, and I don't know if you can see, but I literally got goosebumps. I mean, I remember many years ago when I first learned about Stephen Pressfield, I found a book. I was walking through Manhattan, and someone, once in a while, people would throw stuff out or they're moving out of apartments, and you find books. And I found this little paperback, and it said Gates of Fire, Stephen Pressfield. So I kind of flipped thumb
I
through it.
have that exact book.
Yeah, that one? Yeah. So, and I ended up reading it. And I have to say that book changed my life. It changed the way I approach reading stories. It changed the way I approach creating characters, everything. Because reading Gates of Fire, it was almost like it was cinematic. And I've never experienced reading a book that felt cinematic, which made sense because when I then looked up Stephen Pressfield to learn more about him as an author, I found out he started off as a screenwriter, which made sense the way he structured his stories and why they had such this why that book Gates of Fire and a lot of his other novels like The Last Amazon had these very epic feeling. I mean,
Right.
it was like reading Gladiator, you know,
Yes.
the way the story unfolds and the characterization and the transitions in all the acts of the book, and it really, that's what really structures. So as much as I love fantasy, I definitely approach writing my story using those inspirations I learned from reading and studying Stephen Pressfield's writing, and then his book The War of Art. I mean, the little handbook that he has. That book as well, it definitely changed and inspired me to shape my writing. So I would actually say, as much as I love Tolkien and Martin and Sanderson, I did not try to recreate what they created. I pay homage to them because they are the ones who paved the way and created this world in the first place. The genre, I should say, of fantasy. But as far as implementing the story, my path was definitely through learning how to present my voice as epically as Stephen Pressfield does when he writes his novels. That's what I wanted to do. As far as, well, at least that's my inspiration. As far as that second question, which is very eye opening, and I really love that point of view. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be the next Tolkien. I don't want to do that. I don't think anyone can be. You can't
Right.
replicate those stories, but you can build on it. Nothing is new under the sun, and we could all
Hmm.
like fantasy books, and I feel like we all should, because the interesting thing I find about human beings is even if you and I were to have the same subject and the same theme, right, and we sat down to expand it and write a story about it, because of our very special and unique experiences from the time we were children to where we are today, all the places we've been, the family members that influenced us, the foods we've tasted, the way we interpreted different scenarios, the way we interpret love and pain and triumph and failure, our story is going to be unique and different. My book is a fantasy book. Yeah, there are dragons, there's swords, there's sorcerers, there's mages, there's undead and zombies and these things. But it's going to be unique when you read it. It's not going to be anything like any other fantasy you read because it's coming from my unique perspective. And I really like that point that that author you interviewed made, and it makes sense. Definitely don't want to be the next Tolkien, but I want to be able to open up and create a brand new lane of fantasy and show folks that
Hmm.
it's, as much as we love the European genre and the medieval mythology that builds fantasy traditionally, we could all evolve and expand on that and just make the entire genre great for everyone and bring in those unique visions and those unique voices as well.
Definitely, definitely. And viewers, if you couldn't tell who Stephen Pressfield was from me and Damien's, excitement talking about him, Stephen Pressfield is arguably one of the best historical fiction writers of our time. He's written
Ever.
a whole bunch of books on Alexander the Great,
Yes.
um, the Rome series with Julius Caesar. I'll put him
Yes.
on my list of top 10 with Con Ingleton, Bernard Cornwell, Valerio Manfredi,
Hmm.
Alan Smale, a whole bunch of other historical fiction authors. But yeah, Stephen Pressfield, the way he approaches the characters and the world, it's so organic and just everything about it. It's historical in the sense you learn stuff about the past, but
Yes.
it's not, too academic where
Right.
you're going to be confused by the terms or the technical language some of the characters might bring up. And that actually kind of goes perfectly with this next question, which
Mhm.
is who specifically are the readers? Now, we talked about this before about in the audience, who are we writing for? But the reader is specifically different because I'm sure you definitely agree, Damien, that there are some books that are classified as either, adult, new adult, young adult. But
Mhm.
when you read them, they're like, kind of it should have been young adult or just something like this. But then you have books that are supposed to be young adult, but when you read them, they're kind of more into the new adult or the adult. And I definitely think that also comes with time, trial and error, trying to figure out, okay, for this
Yeah.
specific story, what is the language that I'm going to be using? So let's actually talk about that aspect. So for your book
Mhm.
series, Damien, is it sort of like in the middle for young adult readers to read this and then go into new adult and adult fiction? Or would you say it's more leaning towards one or the other?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Literally, just last week, I mentioned that I hired a new marketing company that's helping me
Mhm.
with the book. And so when I first released the book, I looked at it as a book that was young adult. My main characters are 10 years old, and I figured this would be a story that, kids within that age would connect with those characters. I received a lot of positive feedback regarding my 10-year-old characters, how their voices were very authentic, the characters were authentic, so I wrote them very well. And it is hard to write children, I've heard,
Yes.
able to, to nail that. So that's what I thought in my mind. But after the marketers read the book, they came back to him and they said, well, actually, your book is an adult book. It's an adult fantasy. And going back and kind of reading my notes and thinking about it, I could see that. I could definitely see that. Now, the book doesn't have any strong adult language. There's no strong sexual content. There's no there's nothing offensive in that
Right.
sense. It is a clean fantasy, and this is on purpose because I really wanted to make sure the book was accessible to all possible
Right.
audiences. I don't want to make it too raw, like Game of Thrones, where certain people wouldn't feel comfortable reading it because of certain
Right.
scenes. But I also didn't want to make it too childish, where an adult wouldn't connect with some of the themes and the characters. So I kind of hit that middle ground, but I did mislabel it in that sense. But with the marketing team that I hired, they definitely redirected that focus. And I feel confident today telling you that, yeah, for sure, my book is an adult fantasy, but I would say it's a clean adult fantasy. It's great adventure. Yes, there's violence. We need a little bit of punching and kicking
Yes.
is going. But no strong sexual content, no foul language. There are romances in the stories, but I let the reader use their imagination. I just touch on the actual building of the connections with the characters, and in a sense, it does put it in that adult realm of reading. So it's accessible to both, but definitely an adult-centered fantasy novel for sure.
Nice. And the reason why I bring this up, viewers and listeners, because the readership is very important because it goes into what I like to call probably like the biggest reflection and the true, research and understanding for an author is the path to be an author and to be known as an author, which are two very different things. In
Mm.
my opinion, to be an author is an individual who is dedicated to the craft of storytelling. Capital is important, but it's not the sole motivator. To be known as an author is an individual who's dedicated to the art of marketing, sharing their books on every platform, jumping on every social media page,
Yeah.
promoting their book, being interviewed by other people, sharing
Mhm.
it, and stuff like that. Because I think ultimately we want to be known as authors. And again, nothing wrong with that pathway, whatever one you go on. But the long term goals in both are very important because I'm sure, Damien, you agree with this next statement is that for the fantasy genre in particular, the one subgenre which is dominating the market is romance fantasy. It's read more times than any other fantasy genre in the field. It's read, I think, 6 times a month more than any other in the genre. And so many people or the reviewers who would say, oh, your book needs this, oh, it needs this. And we take that in consideration, and I've had so many authors talk on the show that they were tempted to add in unnecessary material just so that way they could join the high train or the gravy train.
Yeah.
And that, in their opinion, would derail their story because it's not their most authentic self. In fact, one author who I had on the show not too long ago, Raven Velasco, said that her vampire story, when she was still with a small publishing house before she went indie,
Mhm.
the marketers marketed as a romance story, but her book was nowhere near romance, and
Mhm.
the readership was, heavily against her. And she even said that she's a little
Yeah.
hesitant to write romance stories because the romance genre in fantasy is really, really, specific of what they want. And the
Yes.
reason I bring this up, viewers and listeners, ultimately, whatever pathway you go on, either to be known or to be an author, traditional, hybrid, indie, whatever, there's one clear thing which is apparent. And that is no matter what pathway you go on, there's no guarantee that your debut novel is going to be the start of your legacy. And by legacy, I mean the book that's going to make you famous and associate yourself with for the rest of your life.
Right.
Now, there are exceptions to that rule. I've interviewed quite a few authors whose first book have been the start of their legacy and allow them to write more stories.
Hmm.
And that, of course, is completely fine. But on the other side of the coin, there are authors who rise, fall, rise again, and fall down even hard. And that, of course, goes to their long term goals, what they had going forward. And that imposter syndrome comes back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
And one statement that one of my guests did say, which is very important, which is if your muse becomes your source of income, your passion is going to die. Because
Right.
ultimately, if your sole source of income is writing, marketing your book and everything, writing your book's not going to be fun anymore because you're not writing for your passion. You're just writing to join the hype or be part of the trope that's in the publishing
Yeah.
world or the
Mhm.
genre that's dominating it.
Yeah.
So, Damien, in your opinion, from your own personal experiences,
Mhm.
how important is it for authors, especially first-time authors, to really understand, this concept that in the world of publishing, there is no guarantee that your debut novel or your debut series guarantees your legacy in the publishing world, but it should not deter you from pursuing storytelling if that is indeed who you want to be, a storyteller.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that statement. And I really love that word legacy because that word has come up a lot for me in the past few years. Again, my the catalyst for me was the birth of my son, and that all revolves around legacy. The interesting thing about writing or just art in general, once you create something and you bring it into this universe, be it
Mm,
writing, music, sculpture, film, you have essentially made yourself immortal. You
you're
know,
right.
I'm going to be gone, in the future or whatever, but many years after that, there are going to be children from my bloodline who are never going to physically meet me, but they're going to hear my voice and they'll hear my voice through my writing, you know. And that's always going to be there. I created it. I manifested this story, and it's there, and that's the legacy that I'm building for myself and my future generations. As far as going into, why you write, that's an important question. And
Right.
you're not always gonna hit it out the park with that first one. But I
Hmm.
think the important thing with any art, be it music, writing, is consistency. You have to stick to that love. You do this because you want to create, because you have this urge in you to put down the written word, as we are as writers. And you just keep pushing forward. There's no expectations. At the end of the day, what I tell myself is I write these books and I write them for myself. And when I sit back once in a while and I read my own books and I jump into them, I have fun. I find myself flying through the pages because I'm enjoying what I'm reading. And that was the goal. Even if no one knows who I am or they never hear of this amazing fantasy novel by Damien Shilingford called The Iron King, book 1 and 2, and the King series, and they never hear about it in my lifetime, maybe perhaps 10, 20, 50, 60, 100 years from now, some kid in some school is going to stumble over it. And then that's what the purpose of the book was. I can't know what it is now. All I can know is that, yes, the muse is talking to me, and I have this urge and this need to do this story and to be the one that's going to tell this very specific, unique story. So I would say to any would-be writers out there, if they're listening to this podcast, watching this interview, I think do it pure. Do it pure. Write the story that speaks to you. One thing I learned from Stephen Pressfield is that first story is always going to be a personal story. No matter how you
Right.
try to hide it and shape it, that first story is always a personal story. And even my book, I Am King, is a very personal story because the concept of the book is this young boy who is removed from his traditional West Indian or island homeland, and he's in this new realm, this new country that's kind of more European based. And this is the story of my own journey. It's my son's name, but it's kind of like the journey that I went through. You're put into this new world and you learn this new culture, you're brought up in it, and in a way you almost kind of forget yourself and who you originally were. So now you have to
Hmm.
go back on this journey to reconnect with that. So for me, that's that personal story. So anyone who's writing, your most authentic voice is going to be that personal story. It's the one you're going to connect with. Easiest is the one that's going to flow off the page in the most easy way, and just talk about the experiences that you personally had. And to touch on the idea of romance and fantasy. So with my book too, I did include more romantic scenarios in there with different characters connecting, and I didn't do it because I wanted to jump on that trend or ride that gravy train per se, but it was
Right.
a personal challenge because I've never written romance. I've never even read a romance book until recently when I picked up a couple of romance books to try to understand the tropes, to try to get the beats of romance, to see if I could replicate that and to try my hand at just increasing my own personal skill and experience as a writer. So, book 2 definitely delves into a series of different relationships. As you read the book, there are going to be different couples within the storyline that kind of like move alongside each other in different ways. One of them is a very toxic love kind of connection. The
Okay.
other is a more natural, traditional love. And then there's another love story in there that you're going to relate to that's kind of like a young love. So I kind of challenge myself on that front. But the thing with writing, it's a lonely process. I don't have any feedback, so I don't know how I did there. So part of a little bit of my anxiety with book 2 is really finding out from my readers, did I nail that? Are these love connections authentic? Is the romance authentic? And does it hit the beats that, let's say, lovers of romance would be looking for? So, but that's a personal challenge. If I fall flat on my face, that's a good thing because then it gives me an opportunity to learn what my mistakes were, and then I could build on that. And that's how I always look at all negative things. I prefer to lose than win, which sounds kind of disingenuous, but there is more lessons, I think, in setbacks than there are in just winning. When you have a setback, you learn your weaknesses, your mistakes, and then it gives you an opportunity to course correct. And so I'm hoping to get some feedback on the romance in the book 2 and just to see how I did. And I'm looking forward to continuing, flexing that writing muscle and working on trying to improve my female characters, trying to improve the voice of my female characters, and trying to authenticate these love stories that are going to connect with readers who do enjoy seeing that develop, that romance aspect in their stories.
Nice. That's actually really, really powerful, Damien. And
Thank you.
that kind of answers the last question. But before we get to that, I think one thing we do need to touch on is, of course, networking as an indie author, because I definitely think that's an aspect that really doesn't get touched as much in the community. Which, for indie authors, networking is a huge lifeline because
Yeah.
we meet so many new authors. We learn from them. They tell us their own experiences, and we build one another. I know maybe we'll think of the independent community as, cutthroat because we're always trying to, or as people would imagine or assume, we're trying to sabotage one another, but we're not. We're all in the same boat as, our fellow writers, because it's not easy. Being an independent author, as we talked about throughout this interview, is not easy. And, there are so many people we learn from in the independent community. I've learned a lot from those on Instagram, and hearing their stories and what has worked for them has helped me hone my own skills as an author. And I'm sure, Damien, the same is for you. So let's actually talk on that. So, besides, of course, friends and family who have been with you since the beginning, who have really helped you push this story and bring it to the next generation, are there any authors you would like to give a shout out to who have helped you and, assisted you with networking, meeting other authors as well?
Yeah, the first person that came to mind, well, there are two. Definitely Bernie Inez Paz. I wish I had his book in front of me, but he wrote a fantasy book which was very unique, and I loved what he did. I do believe Bernie is Puerto Rican, and he wrote a story that took place in a sort of tropical setting, which was amazing because with my book 3, that's where I wanted to go. And
Ooh, all right.
on that. And the way he described the regions and the realm that his story takes place in with his characters, it was so eye-opening. And Bernie definitely connected with me. He also gave me an amazing review on my first book. He actually read it, and he gave it was like a dissertation, and it was so good. He gave me props on the things I did right. He criticized me on the things I did wrong, and he gave me just a very beautiful, honest review. 4 stars on Amazon, and I just loved him for that. And anything he puts out, I support it. I support his blog. So definitely look up Bernie Inez Paz. He's on Amazon. You can find all his books. He has a lot of great series out. And definitely, Tatiana Obey. I connected with her through Instagram. Her book covers are just mind blowing.
Yes.
I'm gonna ninja. I'm gonna steal her artist. And just find out who that person is because it's just amazing. I purchased her book. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I'm 100% gonna read it. But she is just so positive, so uplifting. Also gave my book a shot. With her own readers. Didn't have to do that. That was out of her own choice, and just a genuinely nice person who we message once in a while. Anything she
Right.
posts, I 100% support and pass it on to to whoever my followers are. And I'm looking forward to making more and more of these connections. I mean, I'm not on a social sense, I'm not an introverted person, but putting myself out there on social media and connecting
Mhm.
with the readers, I understand, readers really need to connect with the author. They love the stories, but connecting with the author is what really solidifies them to your books. And I know I have to make that connection. It's something that I'm personally working on. And I wish there's something, Gabriel, I really commend you for being in front of the camera and doing these interviews. I don't know how you do it. Probably can't see it, but I'm sweating real bad right now. I have the nerves and all that. Like doing these kind of things, it's very difficult for me. But I'm learning how to better, present myself and put myself out there, and definitely connecting with other authors. It's almost like you're going into the situation with some support because they're doing it too, and it kind of gives me the confidence to watch how they move and how
Mm-hmm.
things that you do to kind of give me an idea that you know what, it's okay. Like put yourself out there. Yeah, people are going to criticize you, but you got to roll with the punches. And as much as people might criticize, there are also going to be a significant amount of people who support what you do. And I can see that from, folks like yourself and Obey and, Paz, these other authors who are putting themselves out there and just getting, connecting with their readers on another level that's bringing them even more success. So I'm learning from that, I'm building from that, and I'm definitely looking forward to connecting with more, self-published authors as we go on this journey together and just help each other grow.
Beautiful, beautiful, Damien. Now we're right at the final question of this interview,
Okay.
and you may have already answered it, but I wondered if you could give any more thoughts to this question. So here it is. With everything that you have learned and still learning about the industry, with
Mm-hmm.
the release of your second book and writing the next three in the series, from
Yep.
friends and family, from the authors that you met and interacted with, to even the authors who inspired you to be the author you are now. With all that wisdom that you have gained thus far and will continue to gain as an author as your time goes, what is your word of wisdom to fellow authors who are watching this video, or individuals who have a story in their head but are afraid to share it with the rest of the world?
Ah, man, that's a really great question. I'll speak from my own personal experience. I'll tell you a quick story. So, I completed my first manuscript. Um, I joined oh God, what's it called? Every November, the NaNoWriMo in November.
Yes.
So that's when I was able to actually complete my first manuscript, and this was back in 2017. Once I did that, that's when I hired my first editor to edit the book. When I got it back from the editor and I opened it up from the very first page, there was a lot of red ink. I mean, a lot. And I was going through it. And I did not even make it through the first chapter until I closed the PDF and I walked away. So it was like 3 months later, and my wife actually asked me, I haven't heard anything about the book. I know you gave it to the editor. Does the editor still have it? Did you get it back? And I finally told her, yeah, I got it back, but it's just bloody red. Like I felt so embarrassed. I felt bad that I had this editor even read this manuscript that he had to correct.
Mm.
I felt so much shame, and I told my wife this, and she kind of looked at me very confused, and she was like, "Well, that's a good thing, because imagine if you did not have the editor make the corrections and then you published it, you would have been dead in the water,
Oh, yeah, that's also true.
and name going forward." So when she said that to me, it kind of changed my thought process, and then I was able to kind of suck it up, and I jumped back into the manuscript and I made all the corrections, and it definitely made the book better for it. With that being said, that fear could freeze you. Fear,
Hmm.
as we know from Dune, is the mind killer, right? Um,
Yes.
you have to really get over that. It's not easy, because it's such a personal thing when you write that, when you get that criticism, it always feels personal. But what helps me deal with that is I kind of turn that around, and maybe it'll help someone else, is you have to look at setbacks as a positive. Because the point is this: if you've never known pain, you will never appreciate joy, right? If you
Right.
experience hunger, you can't appreciate that satisfaction of having that shelter and protection and food. You have to fall on your bike and bruise up your knees before you learn how to become a rider. Uh,
Right.
to ride your bike. So setbacks are extremely, extremely important to our growth. So if you want to write and you have a story that you want to put out there, you have to do it. And you have to do it willing to make mistakes. Because if you don't make the mistakes, you're not going to ever learn. You're not going to ever grow. You cannot win if you don't even jump into the game. You're not even giving yourself a shot. So I would say just go for it. Just really, really just go for it. And the biggest thing that I have learned as well for new authors is it's easy to start. It's sometimes impossible to finish. What works
Hmm.
for me, there are different writers who are pansters, and then we have plotters. I don't adhere to any of that. I do think anything in life you need a plan. Um, with
Yes.
writing, you need your rough draft. You need your summary. If you're a sculptor, you have to start with some sort of vision. If you're an architect, you have a blueprint, and that's your plan that's going to help you get to where you need to get to, which is the end game. With my writing, what changed everything and what helped me really finish that manuscript was, first of all, forgiving myself for my mistakes and trying to let go of that fear. And then the second thing that helped was having a plan. So
Right.
whenever I sat down in front of my computer to work, even if I didn't feel the muse and the inspiration, if I looked at my summary and I saw where I was in the manuscript and I had a breakdown of what action was supposed to take place in that chapter, then I just wrote that action. It probably didn't have any feeling or anything to it, but I'm still working and I'm still moving the manuscript forward. And you're going to have good days and bad days, but as long as you have that plan that you could refer to, and if you just work, you're going to get to the end. Even 100 words a day, you're chipping away at that manuscript.
Right.
Even if you do 50 words that day, you're chipping away, you're adding to it, and you're slowly walking up that mountain, and you're making your way to that finish line. So the biggest thing I would say is believe in yourself, have faith, fight through the fear, and have a plan. If you want to be a pantster and kind of free flow, that's fine. That could maybe work for you. But from my experience, you got to have a plan. And if you have a blueprint and a plan, that's going to add to your chances of success and actually getting that story out that you want to write.
That is perfectly said, Damien, and a perfect ending to this amazing author's interview here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another author's
Thank
interview
you,
here
everyone.
on the channel. And I want to give a huge thank you to Damien for coming on the show and telling us all about his series, I Am King. Damien, where can people find and engage with you on social media? And where can people purchase I Am King, book one and book two?
Right. So I spend most of my time, if I'm engaged in social media, would be on Instagram. You can find me at I am underscore am underscore king underscore book. I am king book. I'm also on there as Damien.Shillingford as well. You can follow me there. As far as purchasing my books, I am on Amazon. I am in KDP, so you can read my ebook for free if you have an Amazon Kindle. So I have book one that's been out for a while now, and I just released book two last month. So you could jump on there and get it. And I also have novellas. So in between book one and book two, I have a short novella that's about 30K words. It's called Nasilla. And I'm going to
Mm.
continue writing novellas. So once I release the series, my plan was to always have these novellas in between the main books to kind of touch on different characters and expand on the backstories. So now that I released book two, I'm currently working on my next novella, which is called King Bohemond. And King Bohemond is Beaumont's father who was killed before he was born. So it's going to touch
Oh.
back and kind of give you a little bit of backstory about him and how he became king, his personality, the kind of king he was. And then it'll give some more insight into why our main character, Beau, is the way he is. And I plan to continue doing that. So you can buy my books on Amazon. I Am King Book One, Nasilla, and I Am King Book Two. So it's in that order to avoid any spoilers in the novella.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us for another author interview here on the channel. And a little promotion here. Make sure to go and pre-order your copy of Michael, Last Angel of Earth. It's still
Let's
up for
go.
pre-order and will be up until the 2nd of September. So I'll provide a link down below of where to purchase it. And if you're interested in joining my art team, I'll also post a link down below for you to join my art team of readers.
I might join
Until
that.
then, viewers and listeners, have a wonderful rest of your day. A huge thank you to Damien for coming on the show. And
Thank
as
you.
always, make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And I will see you all in the next video. Have a wonderful day.